SOP number 80 to carry out those particular objectives which we think are so important.
I call the honourable member Andrew Little.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. It was pleasing to hear from the honourable member Cam Calder and his contribution to the debate, at least to hear from a member from the government at last on these very important considerations, because as I think we've established in other parts of the debate on this very important bill, that the earlier debate on age alone has somewhat derailed the reality of the requirements or the need for proper regulation around alcohol sale, and that is, it is not just a question of age and regulating the age of purchase. There are other measures that are required as well, and pricing is one, local input and regulation is another, access and availability is yet another. And I want to talk to my SOP that deals with accessibility or availability of alcohol. But before I do that, I just want to say in relation to the local alcohol policies and the ability for local authorities to make regulation, effective regulation on the sale and distribution of alcohol, is that it does sound suspiciously like a social well-being that local authorities will be called upon to regulate and to consider and to deliberate upon. And yet we know that in other legislation that this government is doing its darndest to remove that power and that ability from local authorities. So this is somewhat contradictory to this government's, I dare I say, strategy, because there doesn't seem to be one. But in any event, the other failing, apart from being inconsistent with the overarching local government legislation, is that, of course, it's not mandatory. It's a, if you like, a voluntary scheme that local authorities can enter into. And if there's one thing that's become clear in my consultations with members of the public and the communities that I have engaged in regularly since I've been an MP on this issue, it is that they are looking for leadership from this House. They look to Parliament to provide leadership. And this legislation, as it stands, with or without the age of purchase issue that has been disposed of, leaving it at 18, the overwhelming view is that this does not, or is incapable of making a material difference to the very real social problems that the existing regime on the sale and distribution of alcohol are presently creating. And so, Mr Chairman, people are looking for a material change, a material difference, substantial change that is going to make a real difference to the availability of alcohol, so that we can start, all of us, parliamentarians, local authority members, entire communities, can start to take responsibility and take control of the very real social issues that a much more liberal alcohol regime has been creating. In relation to that, Mr Chairman, my SOP dealing with the opening hours or the trading hours of off-licence premises is very important. And the default position created by the bill is that off-licences will be able to trade, will have a default trading hours of 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. And it is simply unnecessary. In a community and in a society awash with alcohol as it is simply unnecessary for off-licences to be trading for such an extended range of hours, 16 hours in a day. And, Mr Chairman, the purpose of my SOP is to simply accept a reality, is that for there to be alcohol to be available at totally socially responsible and socially acceptable levels, it is not necessary for them to be open so early, and it isn't necessary for them to be open so late. Having opening hours from 10 a.m. in the morning to 8 p.m. in the evening allows those who are responsible, planners and organisers of events where they wish alcohol to be available, either at home or if they're inviting people around, they will have ample time to make their purchases of alcohol. I think one of the arguments we have to get on top of is this argument that we often hear is that rights are being infringed. There are no rights being infringed. And I make that argument because we consider the issue of rights in this context, that the obverse of a right is not responsibility but obligation. When we claim a right, we are claiming there is an equal obligation on another to observe or respect or uphold that right. And there can be no claimed right of access to alcohol or access to purchase alcohol. And that what is now called for is an acceptance that alcohol is a substance that, Mr. Chairman,
Call the honourable member Andrew Little.
That is capable of causing harm and that demonstrably is causing harm. And so there can be no question of a right to alcohol. The reality is it has been a part of our social landscape, a feature of our social lubrication, if you like, over many decades, over centuries. And so no one is arguing that we should ban alcohol because it can be consumed responsibly. But the regulatory regime we have in place will reflect our view about how important it is or how accessible it should be. And, Mr. Chairman, my submission is, in support of my SOP, is it is time to send a signal that a greater restriction on the availability and accessibility of alcohol is now due if we are to get to grips with the very serious problems that it is creating. And so the proposition in my SOP is to reduce the default hours to 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. And there can be no complaint or criticism that that does not allow reasonable access for those who participate and partake of this substance, this drug, responsibly and in a socially acceptable sort of way. And so, sir, I urge, and particularly those members opposite who I met in the lobby when we came to vote on the purchase age, who were all voting for the raise of the age to 20, who in the comfort of the lobby expressed great concern about the more liberal access to alcohol that we presently have. I implore them to think again, to think very carefully about the sorts of changes that are being proposed in all of these SOPs and to support those changes that are about making a material and sensible difference so we have a more responsible alcohol sale and purchase regime. They know that they want change. That's what they wanted when they voted for raising the age to 20. And there's more they can do, there's more that has to be done, and they know that can be done. And by supporting these other SOPs, they can achieve that and salve their conscience.
I call the honourable member Mike Sabin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pleasure to take a call on this very important